Over the past 4.5 years, I've been trying to complete a living shiny dex in the Pokemon series. For the uninitiated, in the Pokemon series, depending on which game you're playing, there is either a 1 in 4096 or 1 in 8192 chance that any Pokemon that you encounter might be a shiny variant. What that means is it's going to have a different colour palette to usual. It won't do anything different, in combat, but it might throw out a little bit of a sparkle, and you'll know it's, oh, that's my special different coloured Pokemon. There are methods in some of the games to make the odds of encountering a shiny Pokemon higher than they would usually be, but those are the base odds, and unless you can find a way to make them more likely to occur, that's how rare they are. I am attempting to create something called a living shiny dex, and what that means is I am trying to find one of every single species of Pokemon in the entire series that has ever existed, every Pokemon of every step of every evolutionary line, in its shiny form. I'm trying to find that 1 in 4000 or 1 in 8000 chance, different colour variant for every Pokemon. However, today I want to talk about one particular shiny Pokemon species that I have been trying to collect since the very beginning of my journey, and that at this point I am convinced that developer Game Freak is actively working to prevent modern players from being able to legitimately obtain. This is the story of my 4-year-long quest to try and obtain a legitimate Shiny Mew, and the alternative acquisition methods that I tried out of frustration along the way, because Game Freak really doesn't want the average modern Pokemon player to be able to ever acquire this perfect blue baby. Official and free distributions of Shiny Mew, which are no longer available and were region-specific. Up until February 20th, 2021, there were only ever 2 opportunities in the history of the Pokemon series to legitimately obtain a Shiny Mew. Both were region-specific events, both were time-limited, and both resulted in only a small handful of legitimate specimens of the creature ever making it out into the world. First available Thanksgiving 2002, players who could travel to the Pokemon Center store in New York City could once per day, during a 6-day window of time, receive a special gift Mew from staff present at the store, as part of the Gotta Catch 'em All event distribution. You were not guaranteed to get a Shiny Mew from this distribution, with shiny rates locked at 0.5%, meaning that even if you attempted to get a Shiny Mew every day of the distribution, the chances were still very much against you managing to receive this rare Pokemon variant. A little later, in 2005, a second distribution took place exclusive to Japan and Taiwan. Players who brought their copy of Pokemon Emerald to either Pokemon Festa 2005 or the Pokepark theme park for a limited time could receive an in-game item called the Old Sea Map. This item allowed players to visit a special island where Mew would spawn, and was not shiny locked, a term for species that are programmed to not be able to randomly spawn as shiny. Now, this Mew was not guaranteed to be shiny, but you could at least brute force it to be shiny with enough time and persistence. Players could save next to Mew and encounter the Pokemon to see whether it was shiny or not. If it wasn't shiny, you could reset the game and just try again. In Pokemon Emerald, the odds of encountering a shiny Pokemon were 1 in 8192, and there was no way to improve those odds for this particular static encounter, but if you had the Old Sea Map, you could eventually catch a Shiny Mew of your own if you were persistent. And for the majority of the series' history, those were the only legitimate ways to acquire a Shiny Mew. If you were not a very lucky trainer in New York in 2002, or a very persistent trainer in Japan or Taiwan in 2005, there was no legitimate way to ever earn a Shiny Mew. Finally, a worldwide Shiny Mew event, which cost real money and is no longer available either. So, let's talk about February 2021 and the first time that Shiny Mew was ever officially distributed worldwide. The Kanto Tour was an event that took place in Pokemon Go during the weekend beginning Saturday, February 20th, 2021, and encouraged players to catch a bunch of Pokemon species from the first generation of games, with elevated shiny odds. However, the real draw of this paid, time-limited event was an official and guaranteed distribution of a legitimate Shiny Mew. So, how did the distribution work? Well, sometime prior to the event, players would need to spend real-world money for a virtual event ticket. Then, during that weekend, they would need to complete a quest chain as part of the event. If players completed all of their assigned tasks during the Kanto event, they would unlock a special Masterwork Research quest, which could be completed slowly over time after the event was over to eventually unlock a Shiny Mew. I'm going to be honest, for the longest time I really resented this quest. I'd recently stopped playing Pokemon Go after years as a daily active player, due to the game's monetization around transferring shiny Pokemon out of Go and into other mainline series titles. I jumped back into the game and begrudgingly paid the developer Niantic money in order to take part in this event because it seemed like the only way I was ever likely to get a legitimate Shiny Mew. I felt a little coerced into spending real-world money to get a bunch of work to do in order to get a Pokemon that I couldn't get without spending money, and that did feel pretty gross. It was an event that was seemingly built around charging money to access a rare Pokemon that couldn't, in the modern day, be earned any other way. That frustration only increased when I saw the specifics of the Shiny Mew quest, which seemed deliberately designed to not only require sustained daily active play and huge amounts of time investment, but quest steps were also deliberately designed to require the same work to be done needlessly multiple times. I'm going to run quickly through the quest steps, then explain why they were so frustrating to me, and why for over a year I didn't even start trying to work through its quest. Step 1. Earn the Platinum Kanto Medal, send 151 gifts to friends, make 151 Great Throws. Step 2. Catch a Pokemon for 30 days in a row. Catch 151 different species of Pokemon. Catch 30 of each of the following Pokemon types: Normal, Fire, Water, Grass, Flying, Fighting, Poison, Electric, Ground, Rock, Psychic, Ice, Bug, Ghost, Steel, Dragon, Dark, and Fairy. Step 3. Reach level 40. Spin 151 Pokestops. Complete 151 field research tasks. Walk 151 kilometers. Catch 1,510 Pokemon. So, let's talk about the specifics of this quest line. Firstly, the requirement of reaching level 40 is a huge hurdle for any player to climb. Leveling up in Pokemon Go is an exponential process. Going from level 1 to level 39, and from level 39 to level 40, take identical amounts of experience to achieve. As a daily active player since day 1, I wasn't yet at level 40 when this quest was released, and that requirement basically required me to return to being a daily active player for a decent chunk of time if I was ever going to receive the Pokemon that I'd paid money in pursuit of. Secondly, quest steps in many cases do not take into account past performance. It doesn't matter if, over years of play, you've already walked 151 kilometers, caught 1,510 Pokemon, and completed 151 field research tasks. You will still need to do those tasks all over again when you unlock their stages of this quest. Lastly, and most infuriatingly, the steps are laid out in such a way as to make it impossible to work on multiples at once. Take, for example, the fact that in step 1, you have to send 151 gifts to friends, but later in step 3, you have to spin 151 Pokestops, an action which would have granted you 151 gifts to send to those friends, but it happened after you already needed to have sent the gifts. Players will have had to spin 151 Pokestops in step 1 to send those gifts, but that didn't count towards step 3 where they're asked to spin 151 Pokestops, causing that work to get doubled up. Or look at the quests in step 1, requiring catching 151 different species of Pokemon, and 30 of each of several different types of Pokemon. This happens in step 1, but then later in step 3, you're told to catch 1,510 Pokemon. Surely those could have been placed together in the same step, so that you could have worked on both of them at the same time, right? This is what frustrated me so much about this quest. Not only were players being charged real-world money to access the quest, for many people the first and only legitimate opportunity they've ever had to acquire a Shiny Mew, but even after paying that money, the quest felt deliberately designed to waste players' time and lock them into a commitment of daily active play. Still, it was a legitimate way to acquire a Shiny Mew. Now, if you didn't pay for a ticket for the Kanto Tour event prior to February 2021, there is no longer any legitimate way to acquire this quest in Pokemon Go. But if you did pay for a ticket for the event, the Shiny Mew is guaranteed, and there is no limit on when you can complete the quest to achieve it. And you know what? Earlier this year, I did finally complete that quest. After a year of being annoyed at the quest's mere existence, I buckled down, I played a bunch of Pokemon Go over a few weeks, got my Shiny Mew, and got back out. I wasn't going to let the game win and get me back into daily active play after the developer's monetization methods pushed me away, but I did get my Shiny Mew. The not-so-official, but kind of achievable, ways to achieve a Shiny Mew, that Pokemon Home will consider legitimate enough to use. So, let's say you're a Pokemon trainer who missed out on all 3 of the previously mentioned methods to earn a Shiny Mew, but you still desperately want one for your collection. Well, let's talk about your options. I'm going to detail a number of options which technically work and can be employed if you're eager to get one of these less than legitimately added to your team of Pokemon. All of the methods I'm going to mention do work, but they all come with caveats. I will start with those that most closely emulate a legitimate acquisition, and work down through the methods to some of the less legitimate ones. Acquiring an unofficial old C-map. Officially, there is no way to get an old C-map in Pokemon Emerald in 2022, but if you don't mind fudging the rules a little bit, there are some options available to players. So, you could go online and attempt to purchase a legitimate distribution cartridge or distribution machine from the original old C-map events. Or you could find a ROM for that cartridge online and place it on a flash cart, and use that to give yourself an old C-map that works in a modern physical copy of Pokemon Emerald. Alternatively, some people online sell Pokemon Emerald cartridges with an old C-map modified onto the save file. Or you could go and purchase a cheat device which could give you, just put the item on your save file yourself. While these methods all circumvent Game Freak's desire for the old C-map to be a time-limited, event-exclusive item, you will still have to acquire the Shiny Mew the same way that a legitimate player would have had to back in the day, by soft resetting the game an unholy number of times. As far as unofficial ways to get a Shiny Mew, fudging the numbers to get yourself an old C-map is about the closest you'll ever get to the official legitimate experience. And really, if you can find an official distribution cartridge out there, who's to say that Shiny Mew isn't legit, despite the fact that you got it way later than Pokemon, wanted you to get it? I'll leave that debate for other people to have. For most people, it's the closest thing there is to a legitimate method available today. The Gen 1 Mew Encounter Glitch. Okay, so this method is going to involve a few glitches and is definitely not Nintendo sanctioned. But this method doesn't require anything outside of a copy of Pokemon Red or Blue, and you could argue that it carries some legitimacy due to its acquisition being within an official copy of a Pokemon game. So, I'm not going to detail the specifics of the original glitch here in too much detail. There's a lot of videos online you can go check out. But in Gen 1 Pokemon games, there is a specific trainer north of Cerulean City who you can step into view of and then teleport away before they manage to engage you in battle. Depending on which Pokemon was last encountered before this teleportation, players can then head north to Nugget Bridge and encounter a Pokemon based on overflow stats from that last encounter. This glitch can allow players to, if done correctly, encounter a wild Mew in their copy of Pokemon Red and Blue. So, how do you ensure that this Mew that you catch in Gen 1 is shiny? Well, shiny Pokemon don't actually exist in the Gen 1 games, but there is a fun trick associated with that. Pokemon in Generation 2 are determined to be shiny or not based on their IVs, secret little hidden values individual to each specific Pokemon. So, if you can catch a Mew in Gen 1 via this glitch, and check that it has the correct stats, you can transfer it to Gen 2, and it will be shiny. If a Pokemon's speed, defense, and special IVs are all 10, and its attack IV is 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, or 15, it will be shiny when transferred to Gen 2. I'll link down in the video description to a video of someone using this method to soft reset for a shiny Mew, and then transfer it to show that it's shiny in Gen 2, just to sort of demonstrate the specifics of how a shiny hunt for that works. However, something that the linked video in the description will not tell you is that While this glitched soft reset method does work, including on the 3DS Virtual Console ports of the original games, you won't be able to transfer this Shiny Mew into Pokemon Bank and then into Pokemon Home without a bit of slightly scary legwork. I'm going to include a link to a second video down below in the description, but the short version is that you're going to have to use a second glitch, the Missing No glitch, where players encounter a placeholder Pokemon deliberately, causing issues with proper operation of Gen 1 games, causing the game to behave strangely, including duplicating items or leading to Pokemon above level 100 existing. The Missing No glitch can be used as part of something called ACE, or Arbitrary Code Execution. Much like the Mew encounter glitch itself, you're basically deliberately loading certain values into the game's memory so that when executed, unexpected events will resolve. In the case of this Shiny Mew, you're basically trying to change its original trainer name and original trainer number value. The process is complicated, tedious, and can easily be screwed up, but if perfectly followed, you can get a Shiny Mew, which will transfer forward to Bank and then Home, achieved without using anything but an admittedly very broken copy of Pokemon Red or Blue on the 3DS Virtual Console. Maybe, just maybe, buy a fake one off eBay. Look, I know I've just spent an entire video explaining in depth every possible way to try and get a legitimate or semi-legitimate Shiny Mew in 2022, but let's be honest, unless Game Freak someday decides to do a free event giveaway for Shiny Mew, which isn't time or region limited, or release a game where Mew is available to all and not shiny locked, your choices are to already have gotten a Shiny Mew distribution, or to get one in a way that Game Freak probably doesn't want you to. You could get that flash cart of the old C-Map distribution cartridge, or even buy a legitimate copy for a ridiculous price online. You could glitch your way into a Mew and glitch it into having the right info show up as official in Pokemon Home. But in a world where Game Freak won't offer you any official way to get the creature today, and makes no promises it will ever be available officially in the future, you could just pay someone on eBay to generate one for you that looks legitimate enough and get them to trade it to you. I know that sounds like a cop-out, and it kind of is, but let's be honest. Is the Shiny Mew that I earned from doing a paid Pokemon Go event that you can no longer pay to take part in really worth anything more than a Shiny Mew that someone else used a distribution cart ROM to soft reset Shiny Hunt for in Emerald? Is that any more legitimate than someone who soft resets in Gen 1 and then fudges the numbers to glitch that Pokemon into working without using any tools outside of the Gen 1 games? If Nintendo won't give most Pokemon players an official way to get this creature, is getting it through rule-dodging means justified? Finally completing my quest. Look, I love shiny hunting in the Pokemon games, but I'm not a snob about it. I don't care if your Shiny Mew is fake or real. If you have fun playing with it, then it's serving its purpose. I know I have a legitimate one, but I also know that if not for that Pokemon Go event last year, my quest for a legitimate living Shiny Dex would have been literally impossible for me to actually complete. I started looking at alternative methods of obtaining a Shiny Mew back in late 2018 because I knew that, at the time, it was going to be impossible for me to earn one. No matter how many hours I put into my collectathon quest, there was no official method for me to collect one, a situation that many new collectors today will find themselves in. If Game Freak has made a specific Pokemon impossible for anyone other than literal time travelers to legitimately achieve, I honestly think buying one online is pretty justified. I say this as someone who spent 4 years questing to try and find one I could call legitimate. In the end of the day, I think it's okay if anyone just wants to buy a cute blue friend to play with in their video game. Just because I was lucky enough to finally get my legitimate Shiny Mew, doesn't mean I want to keep that Pokemon away from other people.